The wind roared across the wide, open plains, dragging with it a biting chill and the quiet sorrow of a land that had endured too much hardship. Snow lay heavy over the fields, covering every trace of life except for the deep, jagged tracks that stretched toward a shattered wooden fence. In the cruel grasp of winter's cold, a young woman sat half-sunken in the snow, her pale dress drenched and clinging to her shivering body, stained with mud and streaks of blood. 3 newborn infants lay close to her, their tiny hands quivering in the icy air, their faint cries weakening with every passing second. Rough ropes bound her tightly to a fence post, cutting into her flesh, leaving raw red marks across her arms. Her face was a picture of weariness, fear, and a quiet kind of defeat, as if she had already made peace with the thought that this frozen field might be her final resting place. In the distance, the steady crunch of boots on snow pierced the silence, growing louder, until a solitary figure stepped out from the swirling veil of snowflakes. A rancher, his face worn by years of solitude, his heavy coat dusted with frost, gazed at her with a look not of pity, but of firm resolve. Her name was Alyssa, though in the unforgiving little town nearby she was known only through hushed gossip. They spoke of her as the woman who bore only daughters. Life had never been kind to her, even before she married, but after, it became a nightmare. Raised in a struggling family that could barely put food on the table, she had dreamed of a simple life with a home of her own and someone to care for her. When she met Thomas, a man with a small patch of land and promises of a secure future, she believed she had found that dream. But Thomas carried the deep resentment of his ancestors. He longed for a son to work the fields, carry his family name, and prove his worth to men like himself. When Alyssa gave birth to her first daughter, he turned cold. The second daughter brought out his cruelty. And when the third daughter arrived, his cruelty erupted into violence. On the day her third child was born, snow began to fall outside the tiny cabin where she labored in pain. Instead of joy or relief, Thomas's face darkened like the stormy winter sky, and his words sliced deeper than any blade. By the time night fell, she was too weak to fight as he dragged her into the freezing cold, tied her to the fence at the farthest edge of his land, and abandoned her with her newborns in the snow. "This is your punishment," he said, for failing to give him the son he thought he was owed. Hours dragged on. The wind tore at her soaked dress, her fingers lost all feeling, and snow clung to her eyelashes until the world blurred into a haze of white and grey. She tried desperately to shield her babies with the little warmth her body could still offer, but she could feel their tiny forms growing colder against her. Miles away, in a quiet ranch house nestled near a line of trees, Samuel Burke lived a solitary life. In his early 40s, he had spent years avoiding the world beyond his pastures, speaking only to the animals he tended and the wind that whispered through the pine trees. War had stolen his family, and loss had taught him to keep his heart locked away. But that morning, an odd urge pushed him to check the distant fence line near the road, a place he rarely visited in winter. That's when he saw them. A frail figure bound to the fence, her head bowed low, with 3 small bundles lying in the snow beside her. The sight struck him like a blow to the heart. The snow was thick, but Samuel ran, his boots pounding the frozen ground, every muscle in his body burning with urgency. As he drew closer, he saw the dark bruises on her arms, her cracked and bloodless lips, and the way her body trembled against the tight ropes. The baby's cries were barely audible now, their skin dangerously pale. Samuel didn't stop to think. He moved quickly, untying the knots with shaking hands, wrapping his heavy coat around the infants, and lifting the woman into his arms. She felt so light, as if the wind itself could have swept her away. The journey back to his ranch was a desperate race against time. Each step through the deep snow felt heavier than the last, but his grip never wavered. Inside the warmth of his small cabin, he stoked the fire until it blazed brightly, gathered every blanket he could find, and worked tirelessly to bring warmth back to those tiny, fragile bodies. He didn't ask questions then. There would be time for answers later. For now, survival was all that mattered. Days passed before Alyssa had the strength to speak of her ordeal. Samuel listened in silence, his jaw tightening as she recounted her suffering. He had known his own share of pain, but her story cut deeper than anything he had experienced. She had been cast out by the man meant to protect her, left to perish because her children were not the kind he valued. Samuel knew he could not send her back to that life. He refused to. When Alyssa finally asked what would become of her, his reply was steady and certain. "You're staying here with me." Life on Samuel's ranch was far from easy, but it was honest and true. Over time it became a place of healing and hope. The three little girls grew stronger, their joyful laughter echoing through the once silent rooms. Alyssa learned the rhythms of the land, feeding the animals, repairing broken fences, and planting seeds that would blossom when spring arrived. Samuel, a man who once believed his heart was too shattered to love again, found himself smiling more often, speaking more freely, and dreaming of a future that no longer felt empty. The town, of course, buzzed with gossip. Some cast judgment, others were merely curious, but Samuel's quiet strength and Alyssa's gentle resilience slowly changed those whispers. People noticed how he protected her, how she looked at him with gratitude and trust, and gradually respect replaced suspicion. Years later, on a quiet snowy evening, Samuel stood in the doorway, watching Alyssa and the girls. The firelight glowed softly on their faces, and he realized that the family he thought he had lost forever had, in an unexpected way, been given back to him. Alyssa had been discarded for bringing 3 daughters into the world, but in the warmth of the ranch house, those girls were not burdens. They were blessings.